First impressions matter. Now, more than ever, especially in the world of streaming where you sit down to watch an entire show chronologically. The first episode you see will determine whether or not it's worth your time to continue watching the show. The thing that they call these first episodes are pilots. There's one pilot that's been sticking in my mind as of recent, and I think you might be able to guess which one. Pilots have a lot to do. They have to introduce you to the characters, the world, the tone, and set up future plot lines, all while telling an engaging story in itself. That's a lot to do in 22 minutes, but the Futurama pilot pulls it off immaculately. Television episodes are usually comprised of a teaser and 4 acts. We'll come back to the act structure later, but for now, let's talk about the teaser. Now your teaser, or your hook, must do everything your pilot does, but on a much shorter time frame. The Futurama teaser sets up our lead character Fry, a down-on-his-luck delivery boy with everything going wrong for him. He hates his current life, and instead of celebrating the new year, he's delivering pizzas. To make it even worse, his delivery turns out to be a prank call. He celebrates the new year at the fake delivery address, and accidentally falls into a cryo chamber, which puts him 1,000 years into the future. He awakens and looks out the window to see everything's changed, and he's happy with that. Bam! Look at that! We've got our main character established, the plot for the rest of the episode set up, and some spectacle to keep everyone hooked. Amazing. Let's get back to that act structure. If you've hung around watching video essays about films on YouTube, you'll have almost certainly come across this wonderful thing called a 3-act structure. Now, films and most narrative fiction follow a 3-act structure of setup, confrontation, and resolution. Or, in much simpler terms, a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's simple enough. Now, what is a 4-act structure, and why do television shows use it? Well, you see, I may have told a little lie. Do television shows use a 4-act structure? Technically, yes. They're usually broken up into sections, and each of these sections are considered acts, with ads separating each of them. Let's focus in on this 4-act structure. Now, what is the difference between an Act 2 and Act 3 in a 4-act structure compared to just an Act 2 in a 3-act structure? There isn't one. You see this 4-act structure here? What if I just whoop and look at it? It's exactly the same as a 3-act structure, and nothing's changed bar the amount of acts I say there is. To put it very simply, a 4-act structure is a 3-act structure with a little extra added care to the pacing to accommodate for the ads. Talking about this, the Futurama pilot script doesn't even section itself into 4 acts. It uses 3. Maybe that's due to how ads work in the 30-minute time block, or it could be that ads are played at different intervals here in Ireland compared to the US version. But nonetheless, it uses a 3-act structure in the script. Fry wakes up in 2999 and is met with the first of the main cast, Taranga Leela. Leela's job in the future is a fate assignment officer, and she's tasked with setting up Fry with his new life in the future. Leela tells Fry that he has one living relative left, Hubert J. Farnsworth, another mainstay of the Futurama cast. Now all that's left is for Fry to be assigned his job. This is his second chance and his opportunity to break away from being a loser. But he gets assigned being a delivery boy again, and begs to do anything else. This is where Leela assures him that you gotta do what you gotta do. Now we can discuss the theming of this episode, and that's to do with making your own decisions in life. Each of the main characters tackle this theming in different ways throughout the episode. Fry is already on the side of wanting to make his own decisions, and suffers the repercussions of that choice, having to avoid the police throughout the entirety of the episode. Bender, who gets introduced a few minutes later, is a robot whose choices are programmed into him. Leela serves as the antagonist for the middle section of this episode, and is firmly on the side of doing what you're told. This all comes to a crescendo later in the episode, but let's continue with the plot for now. Fry escapes Leela, and we get a bit more time to acclimatize with the setting. We get this great shot of Fry walking through the main streets of New York, and we see the transport system throughout the city. This is where we get introduced to the final member of the main cast seen in this episode, Bender Bending Rodriguez. Bender and Fry strike up a conversation while in line for the suicide booth, which Fry thinks is a phone box. The creators of Futurama make an interesting point in the DVD commentary about the setting.
With some notes for this script, and they couldn't understand, because we said that we didn't want the future to be dark and drippy like Blade Runner, but we didn't want it to be bland and boring like the Jetsons, and they loved the Jetsons. They said, oh, this is the greatest, and they couldn't understand how the future could be fun with, a one-eyed alien woman and a crazy...
And the suicide booth.
And a suicide booth. They said, why are people lined up to kill themselves on New Year's Eve if this is so great?
The decision we came to basically was that if we wanted to be able to do any kind of commentary on life today, then the future had to have good elements and bad elements. It couldn't be a utopia or a total dystopia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, either way, a utopia or a complete dystopia would be boring after a while.
This decision, while it may seem simple in retrospect, is likely one of the things that made Futurama such an enduring force and is what made the show so relatable. Despite all the set dressing of aliens, robots, and space, it's still much like the present, where things aren't always good or bad. Fry and Bender survive their encounter with the suicide booth, so they go for a drink and become friends. Leela eventually catches up with them, leading Fry and Bender to hide in the Head Museum. The hiding doesn't end very well because they get caught by the peace officers. Naturally, these peace officers do their job. Those same officers make fun of Leela's nose, and she's not having any of that, knocking the officers to the ground, which allows Fry and Bender to escape. Something I've neglected to mention, which may be the most important part of a comedy pilot, is that the show needs to be funny. If your primary goal is to make people laugh and your jokes don't land, then you're absolutely dead in the water. Suffice it to say, the Futurama pilot is very funny. I've watched this episode 3 times at this point, and I'm still laughing at the jokes.
Is that blimp accurate?
Yep, it's December 31st, 2999.
My God, 1,000,000 years.
Fry and Bender are stuck, and their only way out is through a grate that Bender isn't programmed to bend. Fry convinces Bender to go against his programming.
Come on, Bender. It's up to you to make your own decisions in life. That's what separates people and robots from animals. And animal robots.
You're full of crap, Fry. You make a persuasive argument, Fry.
This gets across the theming of the episode most clearly. I remember hearing writing advice before that you shouldn't be afraid of on-the-nose dialogue, and that some of the greatest lines in fiction are on the nose. Well, that piece of advice couldn't be more right. This is really on the nose, and yet it still took me a few times to internalize the information that it was presenting. Bender bends the grate, and they escape in the sewers. Once again, Leela catches up to them, but her tune has changed. She's learned something from Fry. She quits her job because she's always wanted to, but never knew before Fry. Then we have this nice little heartfelt moment.
What is the matter with you?
I just wanted to be part of the moment.
Another important element for a pilot is setting up plot lines and stories for future episodes. Now this can vary depending on the type of show you're in. House MD, for example, predominantly sets up the characters in the pilot, whereas something more serialized like Breaking Bad sets up future plot lines that will take place in the coming episodes. Futurama was unique for its time, as most series weren't serialized. In case you don't know the difference between a show being serialized or episodic, The Simpsons is episodic, Breaking Bad is serialized. You could watch any episode of The Simpsons and have an idea of what's going on, but if you watch an episode in the middle of Breaking Bad, you'd be incredibly lost. Futurama introduced a lot of serialized elements throughout its episodes, which was unheard of for the time. Of course, there's your classic will they won't they setup like in the clip we just watched, or later in the episode where they set up the Planet Express crew, but it also left hints for major future plotlines, like Nibbler knocking Fry into the cryo chamber. Bender, Fry, and Leela's issue is that they're job deserters, so it's time to mooch off an elderly relative, that being the professor. They make it to the Planet Express building, however they are followed by the cops and the floating head of the former President Nixon. They escape, with Leela piloting the ship. The professor offers them a job to become his new spaceship crew, and Fry leaps at the idea. While his title is still Delivery Boy, he's made his own decision, and his arc is complete. That's the Futurama pilot, an expertly crafted piece of television, and I'd argue one of the best pilots ever made. There are of course a lot of strong pilots out there, so there's an element of bias coming into play for me, but it hits a lot of the right elements. It introduces the main cast of characters, it sets up plot lines in the future to be explored, the act structure is incredibly solid, it delivers a great amount of spectacle, and tells a satisfying narrative all in itself. Now, of course, there are many elements that make a pilot great, but these are just some of the elements I noticed within the Futurama pilot. And we all know that Futurama continued to have a stellar run and wasn't cancelled like 5 times. That was a lot of talk about pilots. God, I wish the guy speaking to me right now had made his own. Well, I actually did. I made a whole miniseries, and it's playing right here behind me. God, look at that. Isn't it so amazing? Please watch it. Please, please watch it.
Please.
He's been there the whole time.